All right. My battery died. I believe I was in Mercury in the sixth house. Yeah, I finished Mercury in the fifth house. So Mercury in the sixth house. Your speech or your thinking will be on a daily. It's on a routine. Mercury in the sixth does well in the sixth house because Virgo is ruled by Mercury, right? So Mercury does well here in the sixth house and the third house. In the sixth house, your thinking or your speech will have to do with wellness, fitness, nutrition. It might also be some form of servicing. So your type of servicing will be like, I guess you could even be like therapy. Therapy, you could do well with therapy here, and that could be like your job. You get paid for that, or something that you make as a routine and a pattern. In terms of servicing people with your speech. You could be a motivational speaker. You could get paid for that. You could be a motivational speaker with Mercury in your sixth house, or you just like to do a lot of thinking on a regular basis. You like to do a lot of reading or teaching or communicating on a regular basis. Your job might be that. you know, as a job, you might have to do some form of speech. Um, Maybe like it could be even like those call service jobs. That's a form of speech. Mercury in the sixth house. You could be getting paid to be a motivational speaker, or you could be a speech therapist. That's servicing, but in terms of speech, teaching people how to speak again. Um, what else? You know, yeah, you like to research a lot in terms of like your health. You like to do a lot of research, but you could also be a lot of overthinking. Having Mercury in the sixth house, you do a lot of overthinking where your thoughts are going very rapid. So you have to find ways to create that routine and that pattern in a healthy way for it to be a nice cycle and not just erratic. You know, um, but yeah, you like to learn a lot about servicing. You like to do a lot of thinking on wellness and physical wellness. So yeah, that's Mercury in the sixth house. Mercury in the seventh house. So having Mercury in the seventh house, your form of relation or your form of like relativity has to do with speech. So having Mercury in the seventh house, you relate to that. You find some form of comfort in that. Um, your your you like to teach people, or you might like to speak a lot about relationships. Like a lot of your thinking is based on relationships, literally. So you're those type of people that might do well with podcasts, talking about other people's relationships, being a relationship guru, teaching people how to connect with one another, teaching people how to be business partners and how to connect with other people. So that's where Mercury in the seventh house will do well in. They'll do well in some form of thinking about connection, thinking about uh, how to relate with other people, thinking about romantics or romanticizing your thoughts. So you'll be very good at songwriters who do R&B. You know what I'm saying? You know, having Mercury in the seventh house. Um, yeah, your form of partnership has to do with a lot of speaking. You know what I'm saying? So you might be partnered with other business, big businesses, and you partner with them and you speak about them. You might be paid to speak about them and paid to speak about the people that you're partnered with. You know what I mean? Based on endorsements and things like that. Having Mercury in the seventh house, but mostly it will be based on you liking to speak about relationships and trying to teach people, or you learn a lot about relationships based on you communicating with other people, or just you learning about it, or you teaching it. Having Mercury in the eighth house, your thoughts process goes through a lot of transformation, or a lot of people that you speak to go through a lot of transformations. You're always speaking to a lot of people, but you're never speaking to the same people all the time. It's always new people. You're always getting transformed with the people that you speak and communicate with, or the people that you associate with. Having Mercury in the eighth house, or your thought process is always getting transformed, and you're always having new thought process. So you might give uh, death to one thought and give birth to another thought. You know what I'm saying? So that's how it is. It's all about transforming your thoughts. You also like to speak a lot about taboo things. You know, you like to think a lot of taboo things. You know what I mean? You like to think a lot of things that are very extreme. You know, that a lot of people would not want to admit. You know, you think a lot about death a lot of times. You think a lot about the unseen. You think a lot about things that are hidden. A lot of times, you discover a lot of hidden things. You know, just by talking to other people or talking to people that are you know, usually like they like to hide themselves from society. You know, they're you know what I mean, because eighth house has to do with hidden. So you might do a lot of your speaking behind closed doors. You might do a lot of your communicating behind closed doors. You might not want everyone to know what you're thinking. You might not want everyone to know what you're saying to other people. You know what I mean? Um, but yeah, that also goes there in Mercury in the eighth house. A lot of times you might think a lot about your dead relatives. A lot of times your dead relatives can visit you in your dreams or visit you just on your local surrounding based on your interaction. You know, you might think of your dead relative based on seeing something around you. It might remind you of your dead relative. You know what I mean? And they can speak to you through. You're the type of person that will think like this. You know, they can speak to you through your interactions. You know, when you experience something, it reminds you of something, gives you an idea, and that's them trying to, you know, spark something. You know, because they don't communicate physically; they communicate through your experience, and that's when you get those nudges. That there's a message from that. That's like Mercury in the eighth house, you know, or you like to speak about hidden topics, you know what I mean, and bringing it to the forefront. Or you like to do that behind closed doors. You know, you like to talk about horror things, you know, things that are very horror, very scary. You know what I mean? You might do a lot of writing um, in the eighth house. You know what I'm saying? About the eighth house. You might do a lot of writing about horror stories and stuff like that and things like that, gory things and paranormal things. You know what I'm saying? Things from the underworld, things from the unseen. You know what I mean? You might do a lot of writing about that, supernatural things. And you might do a lot of research and speak on these things, you know? Mercury in the ninth house. So you like to travel a lot, you know what I mean? But your traveling will be some form of communicating. You know what I mean? You like to talk about your philosophy. You like to talk about the knowledge and wisdom that you have within yourself. You like to talk about your experiences when you're traveling, whether you did that physically or internally. You like to speak about these things. You know what I mean? Instead of actually traveling, you like to talk about it and communicate with people. So a lot of the people that you communicate with might be foreigners. You know what I mean? You might talk to a lot of foreigners also. You might like to talk to a lot of foreigners. You might communicate with a lot of foreigners. You might know how to speak. You might be bilingual. You might know how to speak different languages because ninth house has to do with different countries, different continents. And having Mercury there, you might know how to speak different type of continents, continental languages, different type of dialects and things like that. Having Mercury in our ninth house, you also like to speak about religion and philosophy and spirituality. You like to research these things. You like to think about these things. Having Mercury in the ninth house. Uh, you know, you might come off as preachy sometimes, so you have to be careful of that. But it's just the way you communicate. You know what I mean? You communicate in a very grand way, in a very charismatic way. And you like to speak about nine house things. Some form of traveling, like I said, your traveling experiences. Or it could be like a philosophy, something that you really believe in, something that you really like to instill into yourself and the people around you. Um, some form of imagination. You like to talk about these things, or you like to speak about it, or you like to think about it all the time. A lot of your thinking's outside of the box. You like to think outside of the box. You know what I mean? A lot of the things you think about or you communicate about are things that are not of the norm. And a lot of people sometimes might be like, "What? What are you talking about?" But it makes a lot of sense to you. You know, You might exaggerate your thinking sometimes. You might exaggerate, the things that you think about. You know what I mean? You might exaggerate the way you speak. You know what I mean? So that's also something else because that's ninth house. It's expanded. But yeah, you usually like to talk about, so you like to teach. You like to talk about things that, your morals, your philosophy, um, your virtues and principles, or you might like to talk about your travel experiences. Mercury in the 10th house. Mercury in the 10th house, you're well known for this. It's like your status. You know what I mean? You can make your business of that. You know, it's the way you like to show people who you are. Having Mercury in your 10th house, so you can make a lot of money from speaking. You know what I mean? You can make a lot of money from teaching, podcast, motivational speaker. This is things that you're well, like it's your status. You're well known for these things. You could be a radio host. You could be a voiceover. Anything that has to do with speaking, anything that has to do with form of speech, you can make as your status. You can make as your business. You can be an entrepreneur in this situation. Um, and yeah, when you speak, you like to speak business. So you like to go straight to the point, and you like to also be very direct in what you're saying, and it's very structured. But your status is also very mutable. So you might think one way, but then the next day you might think another way. So sometimes you might be like a jack of all trades type of person, where your status is very mutable. You're this status one day, you're this status another day. You're this status one day, you're this status another day. It's very mutable. You know what I mean? But you like it like that. You like to be mutable. You don't like to confine yourself in one art, one form. But it might still have to do with the same context of speech, though, just in a different way. You don't like to just think one way. You like to think in different perspectives, and that's what creates the whole. You know what I'm saying? You're not rigid in your thinking, having Mercury in the 10th house, but you can be very business minded. But if you really stick to it, if you can be structured, you know what I'm saying? Because mutable comes in and out. It's not a fixed sign. You know what I mean? So it's a bit trickier, but if you can do it, you can do it. So any form of speech, whether it's public speaking, um, podcast, news, newsman, radio host, whatever it is, artist, rapper, singer, you can be well known for that, and you can make a business or a status or a name or a legacy off those things and make money off it too. Mercury in the 11th house. Mercury in the 11th house, you think a lot about, you have unique thoughts, you have very unique ideas. You know what I'm saying? So your thinking and perspective of things is very unique. It's very Uranus like. It's innovative. So you might have very quick thinking, very intelligent. You might be very intelligent. You're very fast thinking. You're very fast witty with your mind. Um, you also, the people that you do communicate with are very unique also, and they stand out. You know what I mean? They're not of the norm. They're not of the status quo. So they usually stand out. Or these are the things that you like to speak about. Group like things that are not of the status quo. You know, you like to create a community and speak to this community about unique ways to innovate things that certain people might not understand. But if you can make them come around, you can. If you can make it make sense, you can use that Saturnian energy to stabilize the Uranus energy. You know. So yeah, having Mercury in the 11th house, you like to usually speak about the collective. You usually like to speak about something on a global form, on a global mass form, and you like to speak on this type of things. You like to speak about different type of movements. You like to learn about different type of movements, and you're the type of person to be like an activist, like a community activist. You know what I mean? Because Gemini has to do with your community, and then having 11th house. the collective. It's like a community activist type of energy. You might speak like that, or you might know how to like, I guess you know how to draw a crowd. Having Mercury in the 11th house, you know how to draw a crowd because 11th house has to do with the masses. Why 11th? While Mercury has to do with your local surrounding or your mind, so you can draw out being far out people and bring them towards your local surroundings. You know what I mean? So you know how to get around with people. You know how to move around people, but still be your own self at the same time. Or you might manifest talking to other people who are very unique and know how to be themselves at the same time. You know, you might manifest that having Mercury in the 11th house. But you usually like to think about that. You like to research on different type of movements, like the women voting rights and the suffragettes and things like that. You're the type of person like that that likes to speak on those type of things. You like to speak on like environmental um, causes and things like that that can help the community. You know what I mean? Things like that. So your thinking is based on the community. It's like some form of community thinking. You know what I mean? And there's innovative ways for you to bring that about. Also, being in the 11th house and 11th house being ruled by co-ruled by Uranus. You know, but yeah, you know how to make friends. You know how to make friends having Mercury in the 11th house, and you usually like to communicate about with these people about different topics that are not of the norm. But yeah, Mercury in the 12th house. Last but not least, having Mercury in the 12th house, you usually have a lot of thinking going on in your subconscious mind. You think a lot to yourself. You know what I mean? You talk to yourself a lot. You know what I mean? Having Mercury in the 12th house, you talk to yourself a lot. You think a lot. But you can also be very imaginative. You like to speak about your imagination if you know how to be like that. But you can also speak about your delusions. You know what I'm saying? You might not see things very clearly sometimes the way you think or the way you communicate with other people. So you have to realize that sometimes. Um, but if you can be very creative, you can be very creative having Mercury in the 12th house because um, you you know how to communicate and you know how to think about Neptunian things. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? You know how to talk about these things. You know how to think about it. You can really, have immutable air. You can see where people are coming from, and you can do that for yourself also. You know, so you might like to talk a lot about your favorite TV show, your favorite anime. You know what I mean? Your favorite art, your favorite top form of meditation. You know what I mean? You could be a teacher too when it comes to spirituality. You can teach a lot too when it comes to spirituality, having Mercury in the 12th house. You like to talk a lot about spirituality. You like to talk a lot about your imagination and your form of creativity. You know what I'm saying? So you could be like someone that knows how to write stories, like creative stories. You know, like someone like you might do a lot of writing by yourself, do a lot of writing behind closed doors. You like to isolate yourself and do a lot of writing. So you might be someone that, like, let's say, like someone that wrote Harry Potter and stuff like that, right? So she might isolate herself for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, get the ideas down and write it all down. That's like Mercury in the 12th house. It's like you're away from society or you're away from people, but you're thinking to yourself or you're writing to yourself or you're communicating or you like to communicate with people, a few people isolated from the rest of the people. It can also manifest you being obviously like in prison or um in a psych ward and you overthinking a lot. So you might have like dementia or something like that, and you might have to go to a psych ward, you know what I mean? Isolate yourself from other people. But that's worst case scenario. Usually it's just, yeah, you might have a lot of thoughts in your subconscious mind. You might think a lot, or you can speak a lot about creativity. You can speak a lot about your imagination, and you might have some form of expression. And you express yourself in an artistic way. So the way you speak is very Neptunian like. It's very chill. It's very calming. It heals a lot of people's energy. It's like Michael Jackson type of energy. The way he speaks, he has like a very chill, subtle tone. You know what I'm saying? Even though he was a Virgo, but still, It was like that 180 energy of speaking. One Virgo 180-degree is Pisces, so it's like that chill energy. You know what I mean? It's very Neptune like. It's very healing. It can be also very captivating the way they speak. It can be very hypnotic. You know what I'm saying? Because when you're sleeping, you're kind of like hypnotic. You're in a daze. You know what I mean? You're in your own unique dream world. So they might like to talk a lot about different type of creativity and illusion. So someone like Walt Disney having Mercury in the 12th house, that's that energy of him isolating himself. Or someone like from Marvel, something Lee, something Lee, but the guy that he's always in every Marvel movie. Um, he also would isolate himself to produce that creativity. You know what I mean? Neptunian energy. So Stan Lee, yeah, that's right. People like that, you know what I mean? You like to isolate yourself to create to be creative, or you like to speak to people about your perceptive idea of creativity or spirituality, or you like to heal people based on your speech, based on your voice. That's what you like to do. You like to heal people based on your speech and your voice. So whether it's through poetry or whatever that is, or singing or things like that. But that's how you do your healing, by speaking. Yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Hope you guys gained something new. Next video we'll be doing. How about we do Venus? You know, all right, we'll do Venus next video. And until next time, I'll catch you soon.